Hey guys, Martin here. First of all, I want to apologize for it looking like I'm wearing sunglasses inside, even though I'm not. I just took the dog out and my transition spectacles have taken a moment to turn from sunglasses to regular glasses. I don't know how they work. I'm sure during the course of the video you'll see them at work. The main thing that I want to apologize for, however, is that there wasn't a We're Still Here this past week. And those of you who follow it, I don't know how many people follow it very closely. I imagine there's a few of you, not many of you, but there are enough of you who follow it relatively closely that it might have slipped you by. But either way, I wanted to say sorry because at the end of the day, I made a promise at the beginning of all this not to leave you guys alone and not to forget about you and not to let this happen and let this slip by me, and it did. Unfortunately, for reasons that I'll just go into in a minute. But the thing that I really want to apologize about is the people who were depending on it as a regular thing. Because, I mean, imagine if I went to a group therapy session when I needed it, and they just said, well, we're not doing it this week. And then, or even just didn't say anything, and they just closed the door in my face. That's basically what I did. So, that weighs on me. The reason I didn't release one last week is it's threefold. Number one, and this isn't the main reason, this is just a reason. There is no main reason, it's just reasons. And they're not especially good reasons. They don't justify it whatsoever. But I had a guest, we had a guest staying with us who was over for about 5 or 6 days. Her name's Julie, and we were just spending time. I don't get to see her very often, and I was spending a lot of time with her rather than focusing on things like this, which is on me. I made a decision to spend time with a friend rather than work on. I did get work done. I worked on Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged and I worked on the Mark Remark, but I didn't work on things like this, which are also very important to me. But they're things that I have to do when I'm in a certain mood, you know. The second reason is that I felt very discouraged. I had a brief period where I didn't feel like people wanted to hear from me, and that's not due to my depression specifically. I think I just felt kind of down on myself. Maybe it was the depression, I don't know, but I think part of it is that I actually did try and film an episode, and I think this is where a lot of my discouragement comes from. I watched it back and I felt like I'd said a lot of very negative things. I'd used a lot of very negative vocabulary in it that I felt if I'd put it out there would have probably affected a lot more of you more negatively than positively. I don't know if you can hear the dog slurping the water in the background, but I apologize for that sound effect that's happening right now. But I felt the thing that I was talking about in the video was a conversation I'd had with my aunt while she was in hospital when I was, I think, 11 years old. And I'm going to return to that subject because it was kind of an important moment in my life, and I think about it a lot these days. But the way I talked about it and the way I came across in the video was I felt like it was very destructive. I felt like it didn't do anything to encourage, it didn't do anything to lift me or you, the viewer, up afterwards, you know, because it's a very upsetting experience for me, but ultimately not in a negative way. I just felt like I'd focused too much on the negative, and that if I released it, I would do more damage than good. And that's not what this is about. That's not what this series is supposed to be. I know I've released episodes in the past where I have gone off the rails and I've started crying and just talking about how worthless I am and how I want to die, and that's not what I'm doing right now, and that's not what I did last week. But it's not that I want to avoid confronting that, and it's not that I want to avoid showing you that side of myself. It's that if there's nothing to gain from it, if I feel like I did something and I put it out there and there's nothing but negative emotions and vibes coming out of that, then there's nothing for you. There's nothing to gain from that. There's nothing to learn from it. I want to reapproach it, not this week, because, again, I have to be in the right frame of mind to talk about some of these things, and I don't think that I'm in the right frame of mind. I'm not miserable, I'm not, desperate, I'm not, like, I'm not even feeling down right now, but I don't think that I'm not in the right place to approach that subject right now. But that's the 3 reasons why there wasn't a We're Still Here this past week. I know that for a lot of you that's probably not going to be a very good justification, and you're right to feel that way. I should be there for you. Even if I'm there for you in a negative way, I should try and be there for you. And again, I'm apologizing for the dog walking across the hardwood floor with her very hard claws, making all kinds of clattering noises in the background. But either way, even if I'm here, even if I'm down, even if I'm at my worst, it's still better to be there for you than to not be there for you, because a void is worse than me being negative. And I forgot that, and I didn't take that into account, and I just let it slip by because I think there was a voice in my head telling me, well, people don't even want to hear from you anyway. And that's not true. And if you ever hear that voice talking to you, it's not a literal voice, or at least not for me, but it's a feeling, and it's a strong enough feeling that it feels stronger than my thoughts sometimes. If something is telling you, you are not worth other people's time, you are not worth, people. If you feel that people don't want to have you, as the dog just belched. So this is great. You're providing wonderful sound effects for my attempt at a motivational message, Tilly. I really appreciate it. If you ever feel that you as a thing, as your essence, as just a force in someone's life, if you ever feel like that is something that nobody wants, that's not true at all. That's not true. Nobody specifically, well, somebody wants to hear from you. Somebody who has probably not even met you at this point. Somebody wants you in their life. There is somebody out there who is waiting for someone like you. And I'm not talking about like falling in love. I'm not talking about being best friends, but there's somebody out there who, when they come across you, is going to want you in their life. And to think otherwise is to assume that there's an astronomical series of odds that have aligned in the universe to suggest that you are not wanted. It's just statistically impossible. You are wanted, from a scientific perspective, but also just from an emotional perspective. You are wanted. I'm wanted. I'm not even talking about like videos. As a person, I am wanted by other people. As a friend, as just a conversation. People want to have, conversations with me from time to time. I know, it's crazy, it's weird, but they do. So, if you ever feel the way I felt this past week, which was extremely discouraged, and like that you're worthless, and that you're not having any positive influence on anybody, and things would be better if you just went away, that's a lie. It's just wrong. It's just unequivocally wrong. And I hope you understand that. And I don't mean to tell you that you're wrong in a negative way. You're wrong in the best way. But what I wanted to talk about this week, in this We're Still Here entry, we're closing in on the 100s, I know. I think we're in the 80s right now. But this one, and the dog's still jumping around, and I apologize. She's in a happy daft mode. But what I wanted to talk about, at least briefly, was how do you know if you're doing better? How do you know if you're improving? How do you know if your depression isn't necessarily receding or, going away completely, but how do you know if you've made any kind of improvement whatsoever? Because I've talked to a lot of people about their depression, some people who have been dealing with it for decades, who believe strongly that every single thing they've tried to do hasn't done anything. And I can't imagine what that's like. And when I feel like nothing has improved from day to day, I feel like I'm fighting in a losing battle, If I feel one morning that I felt better yesterday and therefore I've gotten worse, I feel like that's, I may as well give up sometimes. I don't know if that makes any sense. What I'm saying is that day to day, if I don't notice an improvement, I feel like there's no point in trying. So I can't imagine what it must be like for somebody who's been going 10, 20, 30 years with depression, who looks back at the beginning of things and says, well, I've made no progress, I've not improved whatsoever, I'm not getting better. I can't imagine what that must be like. That takes an enormous amount of strength, for one, to be able to withstand that and sustain, a life while carrying that in your heart, on your shoulders. I can't imagine that. And when I meet people like that, I don't even know what to do or say, because they've been carrying something. I've been carrying this for a very short amount of time compared to them. And I feel broken sometimes, but they must be on a whole other level. So it's almost like seeing a war veteran, when you've been in one battle, and the cats are now playing, so there's a whole cavalcade of animals just doing things off camera. But it's like meeting a war veteran and hearing their stories from, the World War, compared to you going in a skirmish, off in some small, battle zone. I don't know the right terminology. I'm not a war expert or any kind of expert, but it's like that. It's like meeting somebody who has been through the worst of what you're going through, and you've only grazed the surface. And I have to wonder how they deal with it. And I talked to a couple of them, and I've started implementing some of their ideas and experiences, but the things that I've found most helpful, and this is what I'm doing, not necessarily, I don't want to share their stories because their stories are theirs, but what I've been doing as a result of what they've told me is I've first of all made a calendar in my phone, or you can even have a physical calendar if you want. It might help if it's a physical one. And every time I've gone through a day and I feel like I haven't had as many negative thoughts as the previous day, I've put a cross on that day, and so every time I feel even a slight improvement, I put a cross. And if I feel like the day was just as bad, if not worse, I just leave it blank. And that way I have a visual representation of even slight improvement. And that is enormously helpful, even on a small level, because I have like I said, a visual representation. I have an actual chart of the days where I had a slight uphill climb. I had progress, even a small amount of progress. And don't think otherwise. A small amount of progress in a situation like this, where you're going through depression, which is, it takes a huge amount out of you. It's a wound that is constantly getting worse, it feels like, on your life. It's a wound on your life, on your soul. And any kind of improvement, any small amount of healing that you feel is significant. So even seeing 1x in an entire month, if I've crossed off one day in a 30-day period, being able to see that and remember that and have a waypoint, like a handhold of sorts to reach out to and think, what happened on that day? Remembering that day and remembering how you felt a little bit better is helpful. Maybe even make a note of like some of the thoughts that you had in the sidebar or something. It helps. And sometimes you find that you look at months and you've seen like multiple crosses, multiple days have been marked, and sometimes entire weeks have been marked. And it's like seeing the dry land in an ocean. It really does help for me to be able to have that small amount of hope and remember it, because I don't know about you, but I have a terrible memory. I get reamed about it all the time, because people are always saying, well, why don't you remember this that happened literally yesterday or last week or even 10 minutes ago? And I'm just like, my memory is a sieve, so any kind of physical reminder that tells me that I improved, even a small infinitesimal amount, helps enormously, infinitely. The other thing that I like to do is keep a journal. And I've talked about this previously. This isn't something that I've implemented recently. This is something that I've been doing. Mariana suggested it, my wife, for years. And I try and do it whenever I can, but there are days when I just don't find the time, or I don't feel up to it, which is, I try and, whenever I look at the journal and I'm like, I don't feel up to this, I try and take a moment and pause for a minute and be like, well, even if I don't feel up to it, I should still do it. And if it sucks, but it's over, you know? So I write an entry in my journal as often as I can. And I read back over like some of the months where I noticed an improvement, or even some of the months where I didn't see an improvement, and I read and I look for the kind of vocabulary I use. Similar to how I talked about last week's attempt at a We're Still Here, I look for any negative words. I look for words that look like, you know, I've kind of given up, or I look for how long the journal entries are, because if they're really short, it means that I didn't want to talk about it. Or sometimes it means that I didn't have anything to say because nothing bad necessarily happened. But the vocabulary, the words that I use are what really tell me how I was doing and if I've improved. If I start to see more hopeful words, like, you know, words like good, or, you know, hope, love, Mariana, you know, words that I use when I'm feeling like there's actually a purpose to things, and there's a reason to keep going, and that I'm rather than sinking, I'm climbing out of this hole that I feel often that I've fallen into, and that there's no way, there's no handholds, and there's no ladder to climb out. But, you know, sometimes you find something, and sometimes the only way to see it is to look back at the words that you've used, that sometimes completely unconsciously you've shared with yourself, and sometimes you're trying to tell yourself that you're feeling better than you really know and that you're really aware of, and the words that you use are the hints that you're trying to give yourself or give other people. So a journal is a really good way of seeing your improvement over a long amount of time. Because here's the thing, you and I both know that this isn't something you notice day to day. If you feel shit tomorrow, it doesn't mean that you're getting worse. It means that depression sometimes hits you worse one day than it does today. You know, sometimes yesterday is worse than today, and sometimes tomorrow is worse than both of those. But that doesn't mean that you're improving or getting worse. It just means that depression fluctuates like this, and it's unpredictable, and it's a jerk, it's an asshole, and it makes you feel like crap. And it's impossible to really look at it in the now and know how you're doing. So it's important, the only way to really know if you're getting better, and I don't like to harp on this, but therapy is another way of noticing it, because having an outside source, another person who doesn't judge you, but can reflect on how you've been doing and can tell you from their experience with you in a safe place, in a very private discussion, how much you've improved and whether you have noticeably improved. These are the ways that you notice, because it isn't something that you can say definitively, well, I'm better today than I was yesterday, therefore I'm getting better. It just doesn't work like that. It has to be something you notice over a long period of time. So these are my methods. These are how I look back and see the healing that I've been doing. And it is healing, and I am healing, and I've healed significantly. I don't know how clear that is from these videos, but I know there are a lot of people who watch these or don't watch these and think that it's just me crying and talking about how I want to kill myself, and that's few and far between, in my opinion. And these days I don't think that's the case at all. I've tried to make this a much more hopeful series, and I hope that it has helped, and I'm sorry for any of the times that it hasn't, and I'm sorry for any of the times that it's hindered you. But ultimately I do think that there are ways to know and to acknowledge and to tell yourself that you are improving or improved. Not necessarily completely, but it helps to know that you are getting better. And believe me, you can get better, even if you feel like you're at your worst, even if you keep hitting rock bottom over and over again, you can get better. And the fact that you can get better is enough to not give up. It's enough reason to not give up on yourself. There is enough hope that the only way to fail is to give up hope. And you will not fail if you don't give up. And you are worth winning this fight. It is a fight, it's a struggle, it's a war. But you are worth that victory. You really are. to feel yourself smiling again and to feel yourself not having to force it, that's bigger than any victory that anyone could possibly give you, because you'll have achieved it yourself. This depression is an internal thing. It's an internal fight. There's nothing really external about it, usually. So winning that fight, it's difficult, but it's worth it, because you are worth it. Well, that's enough from me. I'm gonna call it there. But I hope that it was helpful. I hope that you're doing okay this week. I hope the holiday season is treating you well. I'm really sorry about last week, and I hope to see you next week. You guys take care of yourselves.